what they say, never talk about politics, religion, or sex, lest you risk damaging your friendships. But what happens when you have three people whose friendship is built on debating those very topics? One's a believer surrounded by skeptics, one's a heterosexual surrounded by gays, and one's a moderate surrounded by extremists, and they're all hardly qualified. Introducing Hardly Qualified, a podcast recorded in prosperous Calgary, Alberta, where Will Connor, Rob Walker, and Angry Duck get together every week to discuss the issues of the day. Rob's on the left, Duck is on the right, and Will is stuck in the middle. And here they are, hardly qualified to pontificate about the issues they're talking about. But if nothing else, they're entertaining.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 5 of Hardly Qualified. I am Will Connor.
I'm Rob Walker.
I'm Angry Duck.
And we're recording this live from Calgary, Alberta, and partially Toronto, Ontario, but wherever it is, it's all Canadian. So thank you very much for joining us. How are you guys this week?
Why do you make such non-committal noises, Ducky? It's like first thing in the podcast.
Yesterday, the guy who... Okay, remember when I was talking about the guy who disappeared for, like, Christmas or whatever? Apparently he's been forced to quit by his daddy, who thinks it's too dangerous for a 20-year-old man to work at night, apparently.
Well,
I don't know. And so the last couple of nights I've been working at work by myself. And yesterday, in order to help out, my boss has been, like, doing the ordering, so that I didn't have to spend the 2 hours doing the ordering at night. And she ordered a lot of bibs. Bibs is what we call it. They're BIB stands for box, bag in a box, and they're basically big pouches of syrup that you make that you pop with and Slurpees and stuff. So she ordered like 20, 25 of them, and I spent 25 minutes to half an hour reorganizing the bib closet, and I ended up dropping a 20-liter bag of Coke right on the top of my foot. And now my foot hurts. Yay! And they shorted me for my paycheck, so I'm going to have to go in and crack some heads on Monday and find out why they think that they only need to pay me 52 hours for 56 hours worth of work. Does that make sense?
all I got out of that is I think I'm going to call you Sweetfoot from now on.
Sweetfoot. It didn't break. Well, it broke the box, but the bag was fine.
Oh, okay.
But
it's
I mean,
all about
that's
the
20
bag
liters,
being
which
fine.
means that it's at least 20 kilograms, which isn't really a whole lot, but I mean, it's syrup, right? So syrup is far more viscous than water, right? Far more dense than water, so it's probably closer to 40 or 50 kilos, and I caught it, the corner of the box right on the top of my foot.
Do you wear steel toes?
Well, no, I don't. Well, yes, I do, but it doesn't matter because I got it on the top of my foot,
Oh, okay.
not on the tip of my foot.
Well, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
And what about you, Rob?
I'm doing well. Ontario also is having lots of snow problems, and so
Snowmageddon.
I'm
Make it sound like the machine was left on overnight or
well.
something.
That's what it looked like. My goodness, this morning it was awful, and the day before was pretty awful. But I'm sitting there, being from southern Alberta, raised there, and laughing at all these Toronto folks that don't know how to drive. Managed not to die or anything on highways or anything like that, so that's good. I'm here.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember the guy that I was talking about who wrote the I Dreamed of Parades Gone By parody?
Yeah.
He was talking to me yesterday about the snow, and he's like, "You stupid Albertans and your stupid Alberta Clipper," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "We have to call in the army. There's 6 inches of snow. I walked to work today and there were 7 stalled cars. You guys suck." And I'm like, yeah, I find it really hard to have sympathy for you,
Right.
So.
Well, today we got like a 25-minute blizzard that came out of nowhere. I couldn't even see 3 feet in front of my house. So.
Wow.
And then it left, and all the snow was melted.
This is Alberta for you.
That's what I love about Calgary. It's like we're wintry enough that we can still say that we're a Canadian city and it's miserable, but not really. we're really spoiled here.
It's a side effect of living right next to a mountain range.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or at least on the eastern slopes of a mountain range in the...
The only bad thing about the city is it's god awful dry. Alberta winters are as snowy as they might be. Our snow is like so dry you can dust it off.
Yeah. I would presume that the phenomenon that creates Chinooks probably also... I would be really surprised if the physics didn't work south of the border in like Colorado and stuff, but chances are they never get cold enough there for them to notice, I think.
Right. So myself, thanks for asking, by the way, guys. I really appreciate
We
the
love
concern.
you, Will. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, whatever.
Speak for yourself. I just have admiration and respect.
Okay, fine. I love you, Will. I will
Alrighty.
own that sentiment.
Well, I appreciate that. And you can go to hell, Doug. I'm kidding.
What? You believe in hell? What?
No.
Only when you
Not
threaten
at all.
it with people, or threaten people
Yes.
with it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, is it an insult if you tell an atheist to go to hell?
Well,
I don't know.
It's like threatening to punch me in my aura.
Well,
I will slap that halo off you, sir.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, back on track. We have 3 topics in our photo bucket.
Fado. I love when you say that.
Fado.
Fado bucket.
Fado, man. Maybe I should just rename it that.
the
Anyway,
Fado
the
bucket.
fodder bucket. Our first one in our lineup is an article that showed up in the National Post. The title is, "Are Women Themselves to Blame for Their Lack of Success in Their Careers?"
Well, actually,
Ducky, do you want to explain that?
That was my title. The actual title
that
was
was
called
your
Facebook
title.
Feminism. And that's what initially, it was on the front page of the National Post this morning. That's what got me interested in reading it. The chief operating officer for Facebook, a woman named Sheryl Sandberg, was giving a speech a couple days ago in which she was basically chastising women for falling into the trap that feminism has taught them, that you are entitled to it all. You can have a successful career, you can have a loving family, and that you're capable and of doing it all. And she said, no, nobody's capable of doing it all. If you want to have a successful career, you have to commit to having a successful career and sacrifice your family life, and vice versa. If you want to have a successful family, you need to sacrifice your career. You can't sort of sit on the fence without, allowing both of them to suffer. So early on, you have to commit. Are you going to be a parent, or are you going to be a career person?
I agree with how you read her when she uses the phrase "lean in" for commit.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
but I think that she was not saying you need to choose one over the other. You need to
correct, yeah.
commit to what you are doing and make the decisions at appropriate times. And she was also arguing that issues around women actually wanting to have kids at a certain point in their careers actually needs to become something that's important for conversation in workplaces. And issues around gender need to become more conversational, especially.
Well, because right now you can't even ask a woman if she plans to have kids or what her family interests are, because you get thrown under the bus as sexual harassment because of this women on a pedestal nonsense. So that I'll agree with her there. That definitely, like when you have just the same thing happens to men. I mean, like stereotypically, men are expected to sacrifice their family life in order to support or in order to pursue a successful career. It's something we've been doing for thousands of years. Men have been sacrificing their family life and usually their own lives, whether they're chasing, dinosaurs. Right, for the Brontosaurus burger, or they're killing themselves at work in coal mines or whatever to make the money to support the wife and kids back home. Men have long been called on to make that sort of sacrifice, to decide either you're going to be a hard worker and support your family, or you're going to be a good family person and find some other way to bring in the money. And until recently, women have been incapable, due to the lack of technology, have been incapable of being successful breadwinners. Like, it's only been the last 150 years, 200 years, probably since the Industrial Revolution, when women have been able to sort of effectively contribute to the economy, because a lot of the family raising has fallen to women, because that's how they've evolved. That's the way the family dynamic has been for 6,000 years, 8,000 years of recorded history.
Oh,
so,
man. I think that's
Okay, so
really
let's talk about monetary economy, not just economy in general.
I agree with that, because the thing is that even before the Industrial Revolution, and families were not nuclear, they were extended, and cottage industry, and women were highly involved in contributing in real economic terms to their community life. And it was after the Industrial Revolution and related philosophical stuff around public and private sphere, and the private sphere belongs to women, and the public sphere belongs to men, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's when we saw the shift.
I think the distinction I'm trying to make, though, is that there was specific tasks that women were well suited for, and there were specific tasks that men were well suited for, and it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that technology has changed it now that both are well suited to either. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I disagree with you. I don't think gender roles were, as defined then, aren't necessarily mitigated by technology. I don't think technology has allowed women to move out of that. I think that as a culture, we've shifted back and forth. Women used to, and in some cultures still do, are the major labor producers.
Yes.
So,
well, then why don't we have any women coal miners or oil rig workers or...
We do.
Yeah. Okay, so that's...
You do.
No, we don't!
Yes, we do.
Find me one woman in all of Canada who works in a coal mine. And not as a secretary or as a receptionist or as a payroll. I want somebody who's wearing a fucking hard hat. I want to see somebody who's working...
You're talking over each other.
I want to see somebody with a fucking hard hat, and steel-toed boots, dying of black lung because she's freaking 3 kilometers underground with a pickaxe, like all the men that are dying in it all the time.
Wow.
Okay?
You risk a really sexist comment, just so you know. I think though,
because I'm sure they're out there, right? But
here's so that we sort of get back on topic. The gender role stuff varies by society. It's mostly socially determined.
I really don't agree with that. I think gender roles are naturally determined.
No. Oh,
yes.
My God. No.
Yes.
No. Biological.
Absolutely.
No.
Okay.
No.
Freeze. Rob, 2 minutes on your side. Ducky, 2 minutes on your side. Rob, go.
Gender and sex are at least partially distinct from each other. Biological sex is how you function, what your gonads are. Okay? Gender is how that biology is socially organized. And so dozens of different societies throughout human history have organized around the biology in vastly different ways. And so you can't say that women is a gendered term. It's not even females. So women, okay, so you learn to become the gender. It's not you're born a gender, you learn to become a gender. So in certain societies, it's women who are the decision makers, women who are the politicians, women who are the warriors, although that's rare in human history, and women are men are the gatherers, and men are the child care workers, and men are this and men are that. It depends on the social organization of gender. There's nothing about, except for a baby comes out of, your vaginal opening, and a man contributes seminal fluid. There's nothing about the biology that dictates that your role must be X, Y, or Z. But your society determines for you what is appropriate. And so that's why gender roles have shifted throughout history in all kinds of societies, and especially in the Western world after the Industrial Revolution. That's...
Because, yes, women can be politicians, right? Yes, women can be good leaders. Women can be good financiers. But there is a reason why men have evolved to be strong and women have evolved to be soft. Okay?
No.
Yes.
Let him finish.
Okay, there is absolutely a reason. Because men, when you think about biology, okay, men, they have like 10 seconds at most when it comes to their necessity for the propagation of life. That's it. Okay? So men have been systematically seen as disposable in our societies. And even to this day, they are still seen as disposable tools to be spent. Okay? So hunter-gatherer societies, men do all the heavy lifting, they do all the dangerous work, they do all the attacking of battles between opposing tribes, okay? And in modern days, men are the ones who are all dying in wars and dying in these kinds of things. And that is because men have specifically evolved that those traits of strength, of the willingness to self-sacrifice, of, you know, the greater good. That has all evolved because of the kind of pressures that that environment has put on mankind. Okay? Just like women, they've become neotenous. They've become very a lack of agency. They're very hypoagentic. You know, specifically because women excel at the behind the scenes stuff. They're good at sort of encouraging and manipulating other people to do things on their behalf. And men are the tools who then do that which the women want.
So, okay, I disagree with absolutely everything that you just said on several but let's just go to the very last thing that you said, okay? So what you're saying is that, in effect, in real terms, women have more agency than men because they're at least sneakier in order to get shit
that's
done.
Not what I said.
Well,
I said that women deny their agency in order to encourage other people to work on their behalf.
That has nothing to do.
Because all the women who went to war themselves, or went and chopped lumber and had a tree fall on them themselves, or died in a gold mine themselves, didn't live long enough to have fucking kids. And then their kids didn't exist to become our progenitors. That's my point.
What you just argued, like most of the 5 or 6 things that you just said, there's a guy, I think his name is Lancaster, but he wrote a book called The Trouble with Nature, and his central point in this book is that we use evolutionary biology or psychology or stuff that's premised on the theory of evolution, which no one denies, but we use the theory of okay, fine. I don't deny it, and most people I know don't deny the theory of evolution because the fact that it's a theory means that it's proven scientifically. So most of mainstream society accepts the theory of evolution, and it's very, very useful across many. Okay, hold on. Okay, well, I'm trying to agree with you, so please try not to henpeck me to death. Okay, so his point is that we use the theory of evolution across a lot of different disciplines, but the problem is that evolutionary biology, and especially things like psychology, which is most of what you're going to, or evolutionary sociology, we talk about men and women using what he calls evolutionary just so stories. So we take the theory of evolution and in effect, we backfill to confirm current social biases about how men and women are supposed to act. And you can see this if you
I never said anything about how they're supposed to act.
No, but what you're arguing is that everything that you just said, you're claiming is natural to the biology because of evolution of men and women. And what he's saying is that no, you actually have gendered, socialized assumptions about how men and women are and how males and females are. And then we use the theory of evolution to backfill our own biases. And he demonstrates this for 300 pages. So I encourage our listeners to look him up, and I'll put it in the show notes. But that's his central argument, and I haven't heard a single thing that you've said in your 2-minute time,
My
Ducky.
diatribe?
That actually would disprove his thesis, because you're taking social facts about how men and women act and reducing it to biology, and I think that's really unwise. Especially.
Okay, let me put it this. Let me simply put it this way then. If it didn't work, why do we do it?
What do you mean? If it didn't work?
If it doesn't work. If it didn't work, why did we do it?
I fill in your antecedent. What doesn't work?
If traditional gender roles did not work, then why did we use them for 4,000 years?
Patriarchy.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
Okay.
Oh my God!
That's it. No. Stop. Whoa. I know this is like the third time that I've done this since we've started doing it. So here's what I'm going to suggest. We get back to the root of this article, because there's some things in here I want to discuss that I think are more relevant to what Ms. Sandberg was saying. And next week, completely, we will discuss nothing but feminism. Are you guys okay with that?
No, I think today is our feminism day.
Yeah, I think.
Judging by what's in the fodder bucket.
Okay, but I'm talking about more on a theoretical level versus here we actually have more current events.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Can we do that? Because I just want to get through what we have on the story list, and it'll be a good setup for next week. But I know you guys obviously are very far apart on that, and maybe it's a good point to do just a theoretical feminism, anti-feminism,
counter-feminism.
Counter-feminism.
There's a difference between anti-feminism and counter-feminism.
Fair enough. So let's make that our next episode, if you guys are amiable to that. Okay. So for me, going back to this original article, what I really appreciated, the thesis that I really appreciated about what Sheryl Sandberg had to say, was that we, as business owners, when we're hiring people, we should be able to say and have conversations around, reproductive plans, whether it be with males or females. And I think her point was, because we've created this as a taboo within employment, women are self-censoring, if you will, or I think the word that she used was, putting a cliff in front of them where they just decide that they're no longer going to go further. And I do think that is very much an injustice, not in maybe an intentional one, and whether or not women are creating it or men are creating it, I don't really think this is a gender issue. I think this is just kind of a political correctness run amok, right? If as an employer,
it's a gender issue.
Well, she also lays the blame squarely on women for falling for it, though, and that's something worth. That's something worth applauding.
She talks to both. She says, "Look."
So that's what I'm saying, though, that this isn't strictly a gender issue. I think she's illustrating the consequences among the genders, not so much that this is something that only applies to women. As an employer, I would love to have the ability when I'm hiring somebody to say, "Okay, so do you have kids? Are you planning on having kids? Because then I can plan, right?" Whereas how a lot of women do it right now is, and that I've experienced, is after the first trimester or so, it's, "Hey, I'm pregnant." So now, instead of me being able to plan for a year or two of transitionary period, knowing that she's going to be going away and coming back, and what you often see in job postings is, okay, well, we have somebody that's like leaving in 3 weeks, and we need to find somebody to replace them for 9 months and get them up to speed. And then when that person comes back, if they come back, we need to be able to adjust somehow with this extra person, right? And it's really, really hard for a business and really, really hard for HR to do it. And of course, nobody wants to offend anyone. Nobody wants to say, well, you're planning on getting pregnant because I don't want to, therefore I'm not going to hire you. And in higher performance positions like lawyers and executives and whatnot, you kind of do have to make that sacrifice as a politician and whatnot. If you have a limited term of engagement, it is, I think, within reason to be honest about your intentions. I mean, if you get pregnant, you get pregnant. But if you're planning on getting pregnant, whether you're male or female, I think that as a society, we'd benefit more if we could have open, clear conversations about this with our employers and with our staff, and then we can accommodate around it. I think that the whole policy or the politically correctness of this came about as saying, well, we want to prevent discrimination against pregnant women. And so I understand the root of it, but the consequence is that, we have this fiscal cliff. We have women who may be taking 2 or 3 years off, who don't feel that they can re-enter an industry, that there is no sort of part-time or transitionary period. There's no bridging programs. There's no, how can we keep people involved and employed? It's like, let's just discard people.
I don't know. I really find it hard to accept the claim that it's discrimination against pregnant women, because it's not really. What it is expecting pregnant women to accept the consequences of their choices. That's not discrimination, And I really dislike how it immediately jumps to discrimination. because it's not.
Okay, but explain why
But it can
isn't.
feel like that. No, well, it can feel like that. So I think that's where it comes from, right? Just because I'm pregnant, I'm no longer capable or I'm no longer valuable. Whether or not that's the intent, I honestly don't.
No,
think
it has
that's the
nothing to
intent.
do with whether you're capable or valuable. It's whether or not you are, well, I guess capable, but you're not losing value. You're just shifting it away from your career. And that's
Right.
that's what's really bothering me about this whole we can't offend or make it appear that we're discriminating against women. Because if you can't do the job, you can't do the fucking job, and it doesn't matter, why you can't do the job. You can't do the job if you're drunk, you can't do the job if you're pregnant, you can't do the job if you're hit by a car and you lose your leg,
Right. If you're not present.
Being pregnant. Speaking as a disabled man, I'm not comfortable with the analogy I'm about to make. But if one is pregnant, it would be more or less equivalent to being on temporary disability, where you could intend to return to work. And it's not, because unplanned pregnancies occur all the time. And so a woman can want to, dedicate time to career and go, oh, well, okay, life happens and I'm pregnant. And so I would like to have a job there because I do intend to come back. And I think that it's equally unfair to sort of go, oh, you're on temporary disability. Sorry, your job won't be, because there's a time limit. So.
But there isn't a time limit, though.
Well,
unless she's given the child up for adoption,
Well, but
unless she's got a father at home who's willing to stay home and take care of the kid 100% of the time.
Okay, but here's the thing.
That's why we need to be willing to have the discussion, because women notoriously like to try to straddle the fence between career and family.
Oh, okay. No. Hold on.
Soda man.
They do more now.
I think
it's more socially acceptable now.
I think it's unfair to talk about straddling the fence when it's true from sociological research, at least in Canada and probably the US as well, that women still do 2/3 of the housework when they're married and their husband is at home and they're working and they've got kids. So women overall are doing just as much work, if not more, per day when they're in the workforce.
Well, they also have access to 75 to 80% of the disposable income. Or let me rephrase that. Control over 75 to 80% of the disposable income in the world. So, you want to talk about inequities between genders.
Okay, so why does it have to be an inequity issue? Why isn't it that, neither of you two are married, so you're kind of speaking out of your ass here. I'm sorry.
I used to be married.
Yes, I know you used to be married.
Okay, so I have some experience, not current, but I have some experience.
One of the things that I've realized that within my relationship, there are things that I tend to get pushed more into dealing with financial and legal issues and contract negotiations and maintenance and so on and so forth, whereas my partner deals more with cleaning and cooking and whatnot. And it's not that either of us are huge fans of that. It's obviously not a gender role thing. We're both male, and neither of us are particularly effeminate or anything like that. I mean, you can't attribute any type of gender stereotype to why we have this division of labor the way we do, other than this is kind of what works best for us. He cooks more than I do. That doesn't mean that, I'm lazy because I'm not cooking every night.
Or that he's being discriminated against.
He may spend, 20 minutes a night cooking, but on a weekend I might spend 2 or 3 hours on a Friday night doing repairs or financial work, and then, maintenance could take a whole weekend sometimes. Like it on the whole, and I think that's kind of where we get stuck at. And in all honesty, and this is what I mean by, the difference in perception between being married and being single is once you've struck that balance, you realize that I suppose that there is an inequity in daily labor But on a meta scale over the course of the year, depending on the relationship, but I would submit that for the vast majority of relationships, it equals out.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
It's a division of labor issue. It's not a discrimination issue, and that's why I get so irritated when people bring up the women do more housework, blah 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 blah, as some sort of example of systemic gender discrimination.
No, it's not gender discrimination. It's gender roles that have not become flexible enough to accommodate changing social conditions. So women are sociologically stuck with most of the housework because
there's no stuck. It's not being forced on them.
It's what you choose to negotiate within your relationship.
Except that. Yes, I agree with you. Ideally, blah blah blah.
Stop making excuses for people, Bob.
You're making exceptions. You know what? If women find themselves in year 4 or 5 in that type of role, then, or whether it be men, it doesn't matter. I mean, to say that, well, I'm stuck doing this because my husband doesn't cook and clean, well, then maybe you should have thought of that before you married the guy, right? You should have had those conversations about money and responsibilities and duties before you committed.
Here's my point, okay? The fact is, on the ground, I agree. Negotiate all these things, make sure it's even. Men learn to cook and clean and sew, blah, blah, blah. Okay, do all of that stuff. But here's the thing. On the ground, when social scientists calculate labor hours and they include housework and duties that are typical for the raising of children, women still have 2/3 of that work because married men in this culture have been socialized not to do that work.
I don't agree with that at all.
And there's no good reason for it, but that is still how it is on the ground for most Canadian households that are heterosexual. That is how it is.
I'm skeptical to that. I would love to see evidence. I'm going to challenge you to post it in the show notes.
Because the issue that you're missing is that the men are always the ones who have to fix the cars and change the oil and rotate the tires.
There's no good. Yes, that may be
and this
what
is
happens.
What's pissing me off.
That
Okay,
what
if
happens.
men look,
Let him finish his point.
If men don't cook, they're seen as slackers. If women do cook, they're seen as oppressed. But the flip it. If you ever flip it, it doesn't work either. If women aren't the ones who are, building the play set in the backyard or cutting the grass or changing the oil in the cars, it doesn't matter because, hey, you can find a man to do that for you. And if the man is not cutting the grass or changing the oil in his wife's car, then he's a slacker. So the question is does it really matter who does what as long as it gets done in the team?
I think the thing is, though, that I agree with you. And in theory, I'm right on board with you, Ducky. What I'm saying is that social roles have not changed fast enough to make that happen in most Canadian households where the woman works and has kids.
Have to change. Stop trying to impose your social engineering on groups of people that you are not part of.
But if people...
Okay?
But if people...
Let people make their own fucking choices.
Yeah, I agree.
And if a woman wants to clean, she's not oppressed. Okay?
If a man
wants to change oil...
If a woman wants to clean, if a man wants to... If a man
Stop
wants to change
attaching all these
oil,
social stigmas to each of them because it doesn't fucking matter.
Hold on.
I'm sorry. It just pisses me off when
women
people
are
are trying to...
intrinsically oppressed by doing housework. That's not
then
what I'm saying.
Then it doesn't matter. Okay? 98% of all men are workplace deaths. There's an inequity. Does that mean we should go murder more women at work to make the numbers equal? Or is that just part of the choices that men make when it comes to work?
But that's not fair either.
What are you talking about? No, it's perfectly fair, okay? Because men choose to do dangerous jobs. Women don't choose to do dangerous jobs. That's the point. It's an issue of choice. You can't say, well, we need half the men to die and half the women to die, so let's make some sort of top-down.
If there's a bona fide occupational hazard, right? Then that's the kind of thing that you deal with in your job. But that doesn't generally have to do intrinsically with how males and females are. That's just how that job goes. Organization, see, this is where I think I'm going to, it happened for me when I was married because I was in a same-sex marriage, that also my household roles happened to fall more or less along the lines of who was gifted to do what, not, one of us is the man and one of us is the woman. So I think that we can work it out in different ways, and there can be we can work this out. But I think that there are lots of straight women that wish their husbands would contribute more, and if many women ask their husbands to contribute more, they're the nag. Okay, so that's a social
The reverse
problem.
is also true. So.
Sorry?
I said the reverse is also true.
Sure.
And I think that says more about the attitudes of women than it does about the attitudes of society.
But women make up half of society, so chicken
more
or
than
the
half.
egg. Well, sure, but chicken or the egg, right?
Yes. The point that I'm trying to make is that, it's not indicative of systemic discrimination, and I really hate how it keeps trying to get tied. If a woman cooks, she must be
I'm
oppressed.
not trying to argue for discrimination. I'm trying to argue that there is an inequality that many women do not appreciate. Because in real hours, they're doing most of the domestic work in their households.
And they can stop doing it. They're choosing to do it.
They have children.
It's a division of labor, and the idea that if the person isn't doing domestic chores, they're somehow evil and slackerish. And that's... if the women don't want to do the housework, then they've got the option to do other stuff. And I'll absolutely support you in the argument that if anybody ever uses a claim, well, that's women's work or that's men's work, I will punch them in the throat myself, because there's no such thing as gendered work. Okay? It's just work. And you as a team need to work together to get that stuff done. That's where the division of labor comes from.
Can I ask an honest question? Because I don't understand something earlier that you just said then. You argued earlier, if I heard you right, which knowing me is possible that I didn't, if I heard you right, you were arguing that there's an evolutionary reason why certain sexes take certain jobs. But jobs have to do with social roles and social training. Yes, they do.
Not
Absolutely.
Specifically.
So I don't see how you can say that jobs have nothing to do with gender or whatever you just said, and there's a biological basis for why men do certain jobs.
You know what? This is actually a great segue into our next topic. So why don't we take a few seconds to have a break here? And you and Ducky can grab breath, calm down, stop hating everything. I'm kidding.
Stop shouting.
Yeah, it's all friendly banter, yeah. Preserve our listeners' ears,
Yes,
right? So,
I don't know. Maybe my mic sensitivity has just gone way higher. I don't know. But I am looking at my Audacity feed, and it's redlined on everything.
Yeah. Well, you've been quite passionate in this discussion, my friend. So why don't we go to a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the TED Talk that Rob had suggested.
Hey there, HQ fan. Do you read Maclean's, Money Sense, Chatelaine maybe? Because if you do, you can go to the Hardly Qualified main page and click the Rogers button there to help support Hardly Qualified. You're going to read it anyway, right? So you might as well help out Hardly Qualified in the process, since we get a cut of any subscriptions earned through our site. And if you don't read any of the Rogers Media magazines, perhaps now is the best time to start. So remember, if you love the voiceover boy and you don't want him to get any more beatings, You'll read some magazines from the hardly qualified page. You don't hate voiceover boys, do you?
More from our illustrious voiceover boy, eh? So
Nice.
you guys are doing a really good job. I mean, seriously, we're gonna have to pay him or something one of these days.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. He's like, I should do this professionally. We need ideas. So if anybody wants to hear a message or something put out on the podcast, let us know and we'll have it spoken for you. Because there's only so many tee-hee-hee don't whip me's and nobody did anything and hi, I'm Will Connor and I'm got a company that we can fit in there. So having to make up 2 of these a week and then record them and then engineer them and then put them together and then fit them in. It's
I don't know. I think maybe we should have a public service announcement advocating for the anti-whining of audio engineers.
So therefore, you admit that I'm an audio engineer, then, eh?
Well, insofar as our 3 capabilities,
Right.
yes. I don't want to insult anyone who does this for a living, but out of the 3 of us, you're our nominee.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Okay.
So, all right. So let's move on or continue on with Colin Stokes TED Talk. How movies teaches manhood. We're not going to play the clip, obviously,
It's 12
or
minutes
maybe
long,
not,
so-
obviously.
It's 13 minutes long, so let's not.
Yeah.
But Rob, if you can give us a synopsis, and I know Ducky, you're not going to agree with it, so if you can hold silent until.
Anyway, so there was a gentleman named Colin Stokes who gave as I said, 13-minute TED Talk about how movies teach manhood. And I think what he means by manhood is sort of how the genders, man and woman, sort of are in society and sort of social expectations about how men in particular are supposed to be. And he has children, a son and a daughter, and so he mentioned that his daughter loves The Wizard of Oz and his son loves Star Wars. And his daughter likes Glenda, the witch Glenda, who's the wise one in The Wizard of Oz, who sort of knows what's going on and explains it to the characters as they go on their journey. And he sort of launches from there to sort of start asking questions about how boys are learning gender roles in society based on the kind of media that they take in, especially children's movies. And he wants to encourage the fathers in the audience to teach their sons to sort of identify with strong women because of changing social roles. Women will be part of leadership teams that they're part of workforces, schoolmates, etc. And it is a good thing for these boys to learn nonviolent, cooperative respect for women's leadership. So there were 2 things that I thought were interesting in this overall talk. The first was called the Bechdel test, which was come up with by a comic book artist by the name of Alison Bechdel. And basically the test has 3 parts. This applies to any movie that you're watching. Are there at least 2 women characters who have lines? Do they talk to each other about a subject other than men? And a lot of movies in our society actually fail this test. But there are increasing numbers of movies that represent women well, at least according to if you use the Bechdel test as a benchmark. He sort of, I forget how he connected it in. This is Colin Stokes.
Well, there was one part that I kind of want to disagree with you, outside of the Bechdel test, but before you continue
Sure.
on that, in terms of your synopsis, I don't think that I would agree that what he was advocating was that we teach our boys to seek female antagonists or whatnot to respect that more. I think what he was trying to say, and granted, it was through a feminist lens, so maybe that's where the error is made or whatnot. But what I pulled out of it anyway was that the messaging that we give to our boys in movies is that to be the hero, you're the lone wolf, that you do it through violence, and that there's always a reward
is
at the end.
The woman who's generally
Right.
passive, doesn't speak to other women, is only interested in men. And hence
And
he
so
brought in
this
the
is the
Bechdel
heroic
test.
Yeah, and that's the heroic model that he sees presented in modern media, whereas the heroine, whether it be Dorothy or Brave or whatever, the girl from Brave. I haven't watched the movie, so I don't know the character's name, but that was one of the examples he used, or the Disney princesses, which have their own, issues,
Yes.
but whatever. Kind of what he was talking about is their approach is through communication and community and teamwork, and towards resolutions that are equitable and harmonious, not necessarily the reward isn't necessarily that you're going to get laid or get rich, and you don't have to kill people to do it.
Right.
So
Right.
that was the distinction that I saw, and that was what I saw
So
as the thesis of his talk.
But that helps me connect, and I think you're right. I don't think I was trying to deny any of that, because I was fighting for language to go to the next point. Colin Stokes invokes the statistic of 1 in 5 women are victims of sexual assault in North American societies, and wonders how. And he's very good.
I would like to just offer a contention there. He claims that 1 in 5 women self-report as victims of sexual assault. That's different than being
correct.
a victim of sexual assault.
Okay, the distinction is noted. I think that so 1 in 5 women report being victims of sexual assault, and when the men, because overwhelmingly it's men in his lens, I happen to agree with him. So his question was, that's a lot of perpetrators of sexual violence. Why does that happen? Now, he's very careful to bracket, I don't think it's reducible to modern media, and I don't think it's video game violence, and I don't even think it's pornography, or a lot of things that at best you can argue are indirectly sort of related to how our boys, is how he framed it, our boys are learning sort of how to view women. And if the standard model for masculinity is go on a violent quest, collect the girl who doesn't really speak back to you, perhaps that's connected to why there's so much sexual violence against women in society. And that needs to shift, and the way that we can do that is by teaching our sons to respect strong women. So I think that's a fairly good synopsis. Thanks for the help, boys.
Mm-hmm.
Right, before I go into my diatribe about why I think this is utter nonsense, I just want to challenge one of your simple assertions that we should be looking up to female leadership. And I think that is inherently the wrong way to go about it. We shouldn't be looking up to male leaders. We shouldn't be looking up to female leaders. We should be looking up to leaders, period.
Yes.
And whether they're male or female is irrelevant. And this idea that male leaders are inherently bad and female leaders are inherently good, I think is demonstrably sexist.
Why?
And it's an
why
attitude that we should be avoiding.
I think one of the things that I don't understand already, Ducky, is the structure of what you just said is called a perfectionist argument, because Colin Stokes does not argue that male leaders are bad and women leaders are good. He actually is at pains to say
I wasn't arguing with him. I was arguing with your assertion.
I am
You just said
I don't think Rob made
confused.
that.
I am confused about how you heard that, because I never said that.
You just said that we should be looking up to women leaders. And
But
I'm like,
the
no, we shouldn't be
women
looking up to
who
women
lead, who
or
lead
men. We should be
effectively.
looking up at leaders.
Yes, but
I
we have an
think that
abundance of
the-
models. We have many, many, many models of effective male leaders.
No. We have effective models of leaders who happen to be male. They're not good leaders because they're male. They're not bad leaders because they're male. So this whole idea...
I don't think he was making that
Thank you.
distinction, Ducky.
Well, then stop genderizing everything.
The
We're talking
words
about-
that were missing, but
Go
hold on. The words that were missing that I read in myself, maybe because it's maybe the grander audience may not have gotten it. Maybe it's just because the nature of my audience or my relationship with Rob, but it was as well that we need to be looking for, heroines as well as heroes.
Yes.
So and I understand your point that gender doesn't play, but when you're when you're trying to find role models, you need people like you who set a good example. That's the whole point of a role model. To say that there's an androgynous, that sex doesn't matter in terms of character, absolutely. In terms of emulation, it does.
I see, because I've actually heard women talk about how they're really offended by the idea that they are only allowed to look up to other female role models.
Nobody
No.
is advocating aloud. We're just saying, or I'm not
One
saying,
of
but
the
I think the point overall is that there needs to be a present, that there seems to be a bias that the heroic model is more dominant than the heroine model.
the non-violent
And that they're very
model.
And the whole point of the talk was that there's also a huge disconnect about how those two models are represented in the media. So let's get back to that, because I honestly don't think that was the distinction he was trying to make here.
This video lost all credibility to me within the first 5 minutes when he started off talking about male violence. Now, I don't think anybody can argue that violence is gendered, which is, demonstrably false. Violence isn't gendered.
It's not. But go
And
on.
anyone who tries to assert that violence is inherently masculine has lost all credibility to me. Right? Violence is a reaction to stimuli. It isn't based on a person's sex. Women initiate violence just as much as men, if not more so, because they often do it by proxy. And to imply that violence is solely a male characteristic is a way to criminalize masculinity and associate men with all violence, which I think is a completely untenable position to hold. And that's why, right off the bat, I recognize it almost seemed like the intent of his whole conversation was to talk about how being masculine was evil. It doesn't take much longer to invoke the patriarchy, and I'm using air quotes, the patriarchy. That made me roll my eyes, because patriarchy theory from feminist doctrine is demonstrably false. It doesn't exist, it's never existed as feminists use it, and it's simply used as a way to explain away a person's culpability in their failure to compete. If someone else is better than you, it's because you suck, not because there's some grand conspiracy of shadowy figures lurking behind closed doors seeking ways to keep you from doing well. Then he goes on to talk about how 11%, only 11% of the protagonists in the top 100 movies of 2011 were male.
Female.
We're female. Correction. Yes, only 11% were female. So only 11 of the 100 movies were female. Had female protagonists. And then he goes on to say that it's discrimination. And I don't think that it's discrimination. I mean, gynocentrism already dominates the television industry, except for sports, and if even then, everything on TV is directed nearly squarely, or if not solely, at female viewers. Arguably because, women control 70% of all disposable income. But advertisers then can, get more bang for their buck if they're making sure that there are more women having their butts in the seats instead of men. He even went on to complain that in the few movies where there are female protagonists, and the two that he used were Harry Potter series and The Hunger Games, he still complained that they're war movies, that they were male characters who were portrayed by female actors. Once again trying to tie this idea of violence to masculinity. And to me that's an argument for equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. Because
you want to clarify what you mean by that?
An equality of opportunity is basically leveling the playing field, or saying that everybody should be judged based on their merits or what their choices are. And equality of outcome says what your choices and merits are irrelevant as long as we have an even split between the two groups we're trying to force equity between. And equality of outcomes is fundamentally flawed as a method of achieving fair treatment and equality between two groups, because it's a way to justify Semitic bigotry against groups that excel well in whatever metric you're using to judge. Right?
Okay.
He then goes on to talk about the best way to prepare a daughter to be successful is to teach them to embrace their girl power. And then yet in the exact same sentence, he turns around and says, this doesn't matter if we don't teach our boys to let go of their boy power.
I don't think that's what he said.
That's exactly what he said. Word for frickin' word. That sentence right there more than any other demonstrates his bigotry. And I've had enough of this misandric bullshit being normalized as a way to protect the girls. And holding up Brave as an example of a strong female protagonism. I mean, I've watched the movie. I know you haven't, Will, but I have. And the whole fucking movie is just a running assertion that all men are stupid, lazy, ugly, troublesome, and worthless, and that they have all died to their own clumsy foolishness if not for the guidance of their long-suffering, ever so tolerant, and infinitely better suited to everything wives. I think the argument that we should be taking from this talk isn't that there aren't strong women, but that apparently in order for women to be strong, we have to weaken all the men first. That's what it sounds like he's saying to me.
Oh,
and I
wow.
Personally, I believe that women are just as capable as competing fairly with men in nearly any venue. So long as we try to keep changing men or skewing the battlefield in favor of women, though, we'll never achieve equality between the sexes. And arguably, I don't think we should be trying to anyway. Men and women are inherently different, they're complementary, they have different aptitudes and skills, and all we should be willing to do is ensure fair treatment that is irrelevant of sex. Usually I have a lot of respect for TED Talks, but to me this one isn't worth the electrons it took to transmit it.
I think that I understand your reaction, Ducky, because I actually made a note of buzzwords.
Sorry about that. I was actually checking the quote, and you are wrong, Ducky. That's not what he said. What he said was,
I wonder, is girl power going to protect them if at the same time, actively or passively, we are training our sons to maintain their boy power?
What he's meaning by that is if we define girl power as, the model of cooperation and consensus building and, striving towards an equitable outcome, and the boy power model that he's railing against in this video of being reward through violence, solo violence.
Well,
so what he's saying here, it's not...
It's still tying violence as inherent to masculinity.
But he's offering it as a social critique or a media critique.
Yes.
Right? So he's not saying that men are inherently violent. What he's saying is the messages that we're sending to our kids through movies like Star Wars or Die Hard or whatnot, whatever it is that in order for you to be seen as a heroic figure, you need to, through your own volition and whatnot, exert violence, destroy things, and you'll find a reward for it. Whereas where we're telling our girls, no, what you need to do is build consensus, that you need to cooperate with others, and that you need to strive towards an equitable outcome. Right? So, which I would think the three of us would agree, take the gender issue out of it, is probably the message that we would want children to have. Not that, that you kind of rape, destroy, and pillage and get what you want.
No, but we need to be willing to accept violence as an effective tool. Because you can't make consensus with someone who's trying to rob you.
Okay,
right?
But that is a completely different issue.
No, it's not. I don't think it is, absolutely. I mean, they're both totally legitimate and valid methods of achieving one's goal.
The overall message is not the same.
Right.
When you're saying that you as an individual need to exert a violence and take what you want, or take the reward at the end.
And the reward is completely passive. And the reward, at least the way that the hero's journey goes in media, the reward is a passive female. And I think that's problematic regardless of your gender politics.
I don't think that's always true, but I'll agree that people are not objects, whether they're male or female.
Okay.
Right, but these are the themes that he's discussing, and he's saying if these are the predominant themes, that we have one set of themes that we're giving to boys and one set of themes that we're giving to girls, and then we wonder why there are more accusations of sexual assault, or there are more sexual assaults. Actually, what he said was, where do these perpetrators come from, right? So it could be something to do with these messages that we're giving. Whether we look at violent criminals, the majority, and whether or not you want to get, and this will tie into our next topic when we're talking about justice systems, but when we're talking about media messaging, I don't think that you can say that, or disagree. Well, you can disagree, but I question your credibility on your disagreement, that males are predominantly given this heroic message that we talk about of, destroy and take. And
yes.
I don't know. I've never sort of felt like I needed to destroy and take. Well, and I have been an avid consumer of all that media all my entire life.
But he's not trying. He's refusing to draw. Because some people will say, well, there's a school shooting. There's a male taking a loaded shotgun into a school, and this is because of video games. They're so violent. Like, he's not at all drawing those sorts of
No, he's saying
lines.
It's because he's fucking male.
No,
that's not what he's saying. He's saying that the narratives,
the whole theme of his entire story is how masculinity is inherently violent and we need to curb it.
No, absolutely not. What he's saying is the societal narratives that we're speaking to our children is that masculinity is inherently inherently violent. He sees more in line, I think, with your ideology than you realize. He just speaks it more to the left. And that's what I was trying to say to you earlier before we came on air, was that you really kind of need to tease apart what he's saying in this video. And I think that you're prejudging and you're reacting. I honestly think you've missed the boat on this one, buddy. Yeah. His message is, we're telling guys that they're only going to progress through violence. And that is not true.
Well, of course it's not true. It's just as not true as telling girls they'll only, progress through cooperation.
Right, but when we're telling morality tales, we need to set examples.
Yes.
And this is, again, what he's talking about.
Yes. And
as the examples and the messages that we're putting out, yes, they're not always absolutely true, but the messaging that we're putting out is, we want girls to behave this way and we want guys to behave this way. And what he's saying is, well, we need to encourage our boys not to solely identify with the violence message.
Yes. Especially because
that was the point of his talk.
Especially because it is predominant, and hence the importance of the Bechdel test. Because if you don't have credible women representations of women, right? Women characters in fictional narratives, they don't even talk to each other about a subject other than men. That's problematic too. So yeah, I agree with.
I don't recognize that as ever have actually happening. But the next time I watch a television show or something, I'll take a look for that.
Movies.
I'll start making a list. I'll start making a list of all the media in which there are not, that fail the test, because I don't think it's as rampant and widespread as you may. There's this guy at least seems to.
There's been improvement. The Bechdel test was, I think she came up with it. Alison Bechdel came up with it in the early 80s, and there's been improvement. So Colin Stokes mentions, there's 11 out of the 100 have female protagonists. So presumably at least those 11 movies have a chance of not failing the Bechdel test, which is a positive step. But his point is that representations of women in standard media need to get much more strong, and there need to be more of them, especially in movies that are targeted to young children. What I thought was really interesting, though, right at the end, he mentions... Go ahead.
Sorry, I gotta disagree with you. I don't think it's about representations of women. I think it's we're putting this type of behavior on women and saying this is a female trait and this is a male trait, and he's saying
so
no,
this is
can't
gender.
be that.
This is gender socialization, and we need to change the way that people are socialized. If that's what you're saying, I fully agree with you.
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm saying. But you keep saying that we need to strengthen,
the representations of women. But look,
right.
if most of our movies,
that's not his point. That is not at all his point.
Well, I think it is, though, because he uses this. Leadership can be cooperative. what we want, both boys and girls and whatever other gender identities, we want our children to be able to build societies where people flourish. That's a very liberal.
Yes, but not identify those processes as either a male or female trait.
Well, this is,
and that again, the thesis of his point was these are the values we should be messaging, and we need to separate gender out of it. We need to stop saying that this is a female thing and this is a male thing.
Okay, I didn't get that from his. I agree with that point, that good leadership skills do not have a gender, and the idea that, like I said earlier, that there's no such thing as a good woman leader. There's just good women or good leaders who happen to be women.
okay.
Right,
Okay.
and there's good male leaders or good leaders who happen to be male, right? I did not personally get that from his talk. It seemed far more to me that he was demonizing masculinity, to my opinion. But if that is in his point that traits are not gendered, then yeah, that's something that I can agree with. I'll agree with Will's assertion anyway.
And that's why I love that you posted this, Rob, because I knew you'd both hear what you wanted to hear out of this.
I don't know. I hear you, and of course I'm just as biased. The thing is, though, I think given that you're in the center, Will, allegedly in the center, whatever that is,
allegedly.
In this, okay.
He's between us anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but here's the thing. I think that I feel more confirmed in how I listen to the TED Talk, and I think it's because I actually was able to hear some of the nuances that you mentioned and mention them, maybe communicate them poorly, but I think that.
Oh no, I wasn't accusing you of saying that you were going to exclusively read in your bias, but what I meant was that I knew that this was going to illustrate personal bias, and not to say that I don't have one either, but in watching it, I was like, okay, what. Because it is very much an equitable non-gender argument, but he speaks through a very feminist languaging, right? Yes. And it's hard to get tripped up on it, or it's easy to get tripped on it rather.
If you're a counter-feminist, I'm not mocking you, but I am looking forward to next week's podcast, because I do not understand. Why Ducky in particular is so bitter against feminism, at least as I understand it, given that since we're trying to say the same thing from opposite sides of the coin half the time.
You're not. That's the problem, though.
Okay, guys.
Well, look, okay, I'll give a shout out. If you want to understand where I'm coming from, go to YouTube and look up a user named Girl White Swat and watch a few of her videos. She's the gatekeeper when it comes to an introduction to the counter-feminist movement, because she explains where all of our angst and all of our irritation with the bigotry and hatred and violence of feminism comes from.
Okay. Now, does she cite sources?
Yes.
Okay. No. I'm not questioning her credibility.
She's probably got like 300 hours worth of YouTube stuff. At least. Just look her up and started her earlier stuff and. Okay, so
do me a favor this week. Put the video that if I had to choose one of hers that I need to watch this one first, put that link in the show notes and I'll watch it for next week. Can you do that for me? Cool.
Okay. So, awesome. This is a great segue into our next argument. So, we'll start on this. Commercial break.
Thank you for choosing VOB International. Please type the message you would like to hear read aloud, and then click play to preview it. Ducky is the coolest. He is way better than Rob and Will. He is the best audio engineer on the show. Ducky is pretty, and all the girls love him.
End of commercial break. Okay. See how I did that? That worked really well. Alrighty then.
Fiat.
Now absolutely. The next, wow, I honestly don't think that we're actually going to get a lot of disagreement from you on this one anyway, Rob, but I'd be surprised. But it's going to be teasing out the nuances of this issue, is the Ryan case. So, I will let you give me like a quick 2 minutes on this, Ducky.
You want me to give you 2 minutes, or you want me to run with 2 minutes?
2 minute. Tell our audience in 2 minutes what this is about.
In Nova Scotia recently, well, it's not recent. It's been going on for about 4 or 5 years. But basically, what had happened is this woman had tried to have her husband executed or assassinated, and had gone around the interwebs looking to hire an assassin. And this got the RCMP interested, and the RCMP were all like, "Oh, well, let's see if we can't, do some investigation here." She ended up being caught trying to hire an assassin, and the RCMP arrested her and charged her with attempted murder. And she was initially convicted, I believe, and then they appealed. The defense appealed, and it was overturned by the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia because it was said that she was acting under duress because she was claiming to be an abused wife. And then the Supreme Court of Canada stepped in and said, no, duress is not a justification for premeditated murder. So no, we're going to uphold the conviction. But then they turned around and said, but we're going to give a stay of proceedings so that she's free to go. So basically, the Supreme Court of Canada has basically said that this woman is guilty of attempted murder, but they're not going to do anything about it. They're just going to let her go. They're not going to worry about holding her accountable for her actions or anything. And there's several issues with this. The husband, who was the alleged target of this assassination attempt, was denied any chance to testify at the trial. She has accused him of horrible, horrible acts of violence and threats of acts of violence, which he has denied categorically. But they had just ran with it and assumed that it was true. And that's why they accepted the defense of duress. Because they didn't bother to check to see if it was true or not. They just said, oh, a battered woman, well, we have to protect the women's. So this whole case is just indicative. And it's hardly the only one. There's cases like this all over the country, where women are absolutely the beneficiaries of preferential treatment in the justice system. And all they have to do is claim that they were assaulted or that they were felt threatened or any of that stuff. And that can be used to justify any of their actions. And
there is actually an affirmative defense within Canadian jurisprudence known as the battered wife defense.
Yes. Where, basically if they, apparently if they've been victims of domestic abuse, that justifies them to murder, to kill in cold blood. And I think
the nuances of this case are maybe a little more than what Ducky described, but essentially you got the gist of it. Miss Ryan, Nicole Ryan, or
she's calling herself Doucette now, I think it is.
Doucette, yeah.
Her maiden name.
Her maiden name. Miss Doucette, at the time she was Ryan, had actually not been living with Michael Ryan at the time that she solicited an RCMP officer to murder him, and was caught on camera. In fact, that the footage of the solicitation is available online. It will be in the show notes. It was obtained by the CBC, and it's quite amazing. She's quite brilliant. At one point, she even says, "You know what? I don't care if you're a police officer or not. I want him dead." So, which must have been a really awkward position for the officer to react to. But anyway. She wasn't in immediate danger. They hadn't been living together for quite some time. She had custody of her daughter at that point in time. Allegations of domestic violence were largely unfounded. The RCMP have done a review of the 25 911 and non-emergency calls that were placed by Miss Ryan. At one point, actually charged her with filing false allegations, and Mr. Ryan, or Michael Ryan, was also at one point charged with uttering threats and had all his weapons seized. Now, both these people are Canadian Forces members, so they also would be more likely to have weapons and weapons training on their premises, right? So that's kind of how that went. The other calls that she had made to the police were all more domestic issues, lawsuits with family getting in the way, and the other issues the police had said were civil issues. How it has spun in the media by the defense is that she and the Elizabeth Fry Society has also jumped to her aid in advocating for her in the media, saying that the RCMP were brushing her off, telling her that, these were civil issues and she should just go away. An internal review from the RCMP, take that as you will, has found that is not true, and Michael Ryan has been calling for a public inquiry, one, to clear his name, and two, to clear the RCMP's name in this case. But
and to have his wife locked up so she can't hire a hitman to kill him again.
Well, and here's the thing, that's whether or not she was abused, and it doesn't seem likely that she was, but we can't know that. Nobody was there, right? So whether or not she was abused, that does not justify attempting to have somebody murdered. Even, the right to self-defense is kind of shaky legal ground and has strict tests to begin with. And those tests require that you be in immediate danger. To make 3 attempts to hire a hitman over a course of months when you are not living with that person does not seem to me to make the test. And that's why they didn't use the defense to test. They went with a duress defense, which the Supreme Court refused to rule on. So they didn't actually find her guilty. What they did was they stayed the proceedings, saying that she had been under enough trauma and that it was just best to leave the whole matter alone. And that was an 8-1.
No, they overturned the acquittal.
Yes, they overturned it, but that doesn't mean that they found her guilty, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
They stayed prosecution. That should have been a decision for the Crown to decide whether or not they wanted to bring charges again. But the Supreme Court, on an 8-1 opinion, had taken that out of the Crown's hands. Now, it's also worth noting that the allegations of domestic violence did not come out until court, and that the Crown prosecutor themselves found that it wasn't a founded accusation. So it's very much a he said, she said.
Literally.
From her point of view, it's, maybe a misogynistic system that is against women and protecting women. The other point of view is that, this is a misandric system that's protecting women at the expense of justice for men.
Because my biggest argument with that is, first of all, that allegations of abuse are being used to justify or to absolve women of any responsibility for their actions, particularly when those actions are demonstrably criminal. Well, I guess that's my point. That, she's a woman who's being absolved of any responsibility. She's not. Let me rephrase that. She's not being absolved of her responsibility. They are refusing to hold her accountable for her actions. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I can guarantee you that if the roles were reversed, it would not have happened. There would have been no, let's stay the proceedings because she suffered enough trauma already, right?
Right. That to me just sounded like an incredibly weird finding. It does not sit well with me. It doesn't sit well with a lot of people. For the record, Rob has left the conversation. He's had to go, so it's just Ducky and I. But this kind of comes back to the HSBC thing, right? Where we're seeing this one set of rules for one group of people, another set of rules, or at least prosecutorial privilege for the other. And for that to come down from the Supreme Court, especially with only one dissenting opinion, would absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah, me too. I mean,
she actively solicited the murder of another human being when she was not in. The battered wife defense came about after if I remember the exact details, I can't remember if the lady involved had been abused directly at the time or there were threats of abuse. I would have to look that up. But as her husband or accused abuser was leaving the premises with his back turned to her, she pulled out a shotgun or a rifle and took him out as he was exiting the premises. And the courts upheld the action. So to me, that strains the limit. But if it's acceptable, that's another debate. To go on and say that you've made 3 active solicitations to have somebody murdered, and you've prepared to pay $25,000 to do it, you've put down a $2,000 cash deposit to an RCMP officer or to a hitman to do this, and that, oh, by the way, you didn't really care if his current girlfriend got taken out in the process, the RCMP officer or the alleged hitman, whatever, during the interview, when she was soliciting him, let's put it that way, when they were in the vehicle, and this is on the CBC tape as well, when she was soliciting him to assassinate her husband or Mr. Ryan at that point in time, actually the officer said to her, it's like, well, has he been hitting you? Has he been abusing you, type of thing? And she's like, no, completely denied it outright. There was no hesitation. It was just like, no, this isn't my issue. And then he's like, well, why are you doing this? And her issues were very vague. They were more... I can't remember them exactly. I would have to review the footage. But it was very much kind of a... Vengeance. He's irritating me.
I from what I got from it was vengeance motive.
Yeah.
That he mistreated me and he divorced me and now I'm stuck with the kid and it's all his fault. And he needs to pay.
Right.
So, at least that's what I got from it. But good news is that Michael Ryan now has sole custody of his daughter, which I think is a good thing because I really...
The courts found her unfit, I believe.
You think? The fact that she got the child in the first place, because he put out a YouTube video where he talked for 20 minutes or half an hour about his side of the story, because he wasn't allowed to testify in his own defense. It was just assumed that he was a wife beater and that he had threatened to kill her and rape the daughter and bury them in the backyard, and that he'd held guns to their heads and if you don't do what I say, this is where I'm going to bury your bodies, and all this. These are the allegations that Nicole Ryan made.
Okay.
Anyway, so he was never allowed to even testify to that at her trial, right? It was just assumed to be true, which is another instance in which anytime there's an allegation of sexual abuse against a woman, it's assumed to be true, right? I mean, like, look what's happening with Patrick Brazeau, right? Last week he was making fun of Teresa Spence, and this week he's in jail because his girlfriend has suddenly decided that he threatened her, and he's been raping her, and he's been kicked out of the Tory caucus, and he's being demanded that he resign from his senator seat, and none of this stuff has even been, substantiated. And it's just, what it seems like to me with Patrick Brazeau is it's just Levi Strauss-Kahn all over again.
So I'm not familiar with that reference.
Levi Strauss-Kahn was the leader of the International Monetary Fund. He was in New York.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
He was the guy who was in New York for some meeting or whatever, and some maid accused him of raping her. And, of course, so he went to defend himself, and he was called to step down from the IMF because, the allegation was enough to taint his credibility. So he stepped down, and the woman who replaced him, turns out, was the one who paid the maid to, accuse him falsely of raping her. So, there's that consensus and cooperation to succeed at your goals that we're talking about earlier, right?
Sarcasm noted.
But anyway,
I'm not going to let you beat me into that one, there, buddy.
Yes, but the point is that we have this two-tiered system of justice, and one says that if you're a man, you're inherently guilty, and if you're a woman, you're inherently innocent, even if you are guilty, it's not your fault. And
well, I don't think it's as consistent as you may make it out to be. But the fact that bias does exist, you know, even on in one case is troubling.
Well, that's not one case. There's another one that just happened in Calgary again, where two exact same cases. I wrote about it earlier, a couple weeks back when it happened, or last month or whenever it was. Two exact same cases. The actions were the same. The two people unrelated to one another. These are two separate cases, but in the first case, it was a husband who was going through a bitter divorce, who was high on antidepressants, apparently, and he went in and he murdered his children, and he was thrown in prison for 27 years or something. And there was a woman who was going through a bitter divorce, who was depressed, who was high on antidepressants, who murdered her children, and she got off with 20 days worth of probation and psychiatric evaluation.
And what was his sentence?
27 years for 2 counts of premeditated murder.
Right. Not quite equitable.
No. And this, I really don't think that this is an exception to the rule. This is the rule. You know, I've seen studies coming out of the States where this Department of Justice has demonstrated, or a consistent bias from the juvenile system all the way up to the hard courts, that women get lighter sentences for the same crimes, and that the same crimes that they actually commit are reduced in charge in order to help absolve them of having to pay the penalties for those crimes.
Unfortunately, I can't offer much of a balance to this argument, right? So I think this is kind of where the conversation is going to have to die. I'm not sure if Rob would be able to be a little more nuanced on it. Maybe we can, in our discussion next week, touch on this issue more. I'm sure you'll use it because you alluded it to earlier, the justice and equity, or the lack of equity and justice and gender. Does it go both ways, right? Where are men privileged in it that women aren't? Have you sought that out?
Well, I'm not saying women are privileged.
Or is this a confirmation bias?
I'm not saying women are privileged, okay? But I'm saying that it's a demonstrable benefit. Where people say men are privileged, they always use things like, if you're white and a straight male, you're more likely to get a job. Or, yeah, but if you're a woman, you're more likely to get drinks bought for you. Is that a privilege? Or is that just people exercising their own, see, when you have demonstrable reasoning and facts to support the viewpoint that women are treated preferentially in the justice system, you need to have, you can't really deny those facts, right? I mean, if you want to talk about, well, men are more likely to be politicians, I'm like, well, we're also in a democracy. Women make up, 56% of the voting population. Seems to me that women are also voting for men, right? So how is that really? Yeah.
And ultimately, whether or not that there's a female privilege and a male privilege in the justice system, or a female benefit, male benefit, those need to be addressed separately because they're interpreted differently, right? So allowing somebody to get away with attempted murder or solicitation for murder is egregious, and it's disgusting. I mean, it's completely revolting to me that the Supreme Court even came to this conclusion. I don't care if he was beating her, or if she was beating him. I mean, the gender isn't the issue here. It's
even if we can see that her allegations are true, it still doesn't justify her actions.
Absolutely. Revenge is the privilege of the state. It is not the privilege of the individual. That's why we have the justice system that we have, to prevent this sort of vigilantism. And what's an offense to me, or what has offended me, is that the Supreme Court, I don't know if they've intentionally made the gender distinction, but that they've said that, at least in this case, that no, we're not even going to address it. And why aren't we going to address it? Well, because we think she suffered ensuffered. And that is a travesty. Bottom line.
Yeah. Talking about the Patrick Brazeau thing, I think Eve, I want to say Eve Ensler, but it's not Eve Ensler, it's Eve Adams, I think her name is. She said something very telling. She said that violence against women is never acceptable. It's offensive to women, and it's offensive to men who respect women.
And again, and me and you see eye to eye on this. This is not. Why is this always a gender issue? Violence against people. It doesn't matter what's hanging or not hanging between your legs. Chromosomes don't matter. It's Where is the humanity? Why is this always coming down to a gender issue in terms of justice and respect and equity?
Honestly, I think it's because these systems are denying the humanity of men. I think is what it is, inherently. That women have value because of what they are, because they're women. Whereas a man only has value for what he can provide. Like, women are human beings, men are human doings. And I think that argument or that point of view is pretty consistent along a lot of these gender issues. That a woman has inherent value, but a man only, is only worth having around if he can do something for you.
I don't know. I think that would take some convincing. But again, I'm looking at it from a different perspective than that. So anyway, now that we've bummed everybody out, we've gone quiet and all depressed, and we've talked about the Supreme Court letting us down, and I will go on the record in saying it that yes, justices, you have let this Canadian down, and I'm offended by it. I'm actually insulted by that ruling. Not that you care, but hear me roar on my internet channel.
Yes, and our 90 subscribers.
Yeah. So, speaking of which, you know what? I have no idea. The tracking service that we use had a bit of a hiccup this month. So, apparently, we've only had one subscriber all month, and I don't think that's true. Either that, or we really, really managed to piss off a lot of people last week. But I know I still have my subscription, and a few of my friends still have theirs, so I really don't know what's going on. But it doesn't matter. That's technical stuff. Any final thoughts, parting shots?
Not really. I mean,
This has been a tough episode, hasn't it, eh? Really emotional. All right. Well, that being said, I'm sorry for depressing everyone. Thanks for hanging on this long. I know it's been a really heavy episode, and next week's going to be a lot worse, so bring some alcohol with you. Well, you know what we'll do is maybe we'll have Josh in next week, and then we'll record our feminist one. And I think the conversation with Josh was probably a little...
Yeah, so far it's my favorite, that's for sure.
Yeah, so, okay, we'll have Josh on next week. It's recorded. We recorded it when Bob was away, just in case he couldn't make it back in time. So we'll drop it into the stream next week. And then we'll talk about feminism the following week, all right? So that brings us to the end of this week's podcast, episode 5 for February 13th, I think it is. No, 21st. No, 20th. Whatever. Again, I'm
pretty sure it's 15.
Listen to this whenever you listen to it. I don't
15.
care. Yeah, 15.
15.
16.
So this is my calendar.
Oh, you have a calendar. See, I'm just like going off memory. Thank you very much for joining us, and we are going to leave off with the Age of Aggression Skyrim cover, because we have an addiction to video game music here for some reason.
This is actually a woman from Mexico who... this is the first time I ever heard her was playing the Dragonborn Comes cover that she had made from all the little snippets of tunes and stuff from Skyrim. But she has since expanded her repertoire to include Halo, include Gears of War. Her name is Maluka. There'll be a link to it. But look her up in YouTube, because she's definitely worth paying attention to.
Yeah, it'll be on the show notes, and we have her blessings to include this in our podcast. I was in contact with her earlier today, so thank you very much. And yes, video games are culture, so quit whining. Yes. All right, we'll talk to you all next week.
Yay!
We drink to our youth, for the days come and gone, for the age of aggression is just about done. We'll drive out the storm cloaks and restore what we own. With our blood and our steel, we will take back our home. Down with Afric, the killer of kings. On the day of your death, we will drink and we'll sing. We're the children of Skyrim, and we fight all our lives. And when Sovngarde beckons, every one of us dies. But this land is ours and we'll see it wiped clean of the scourge that has sullied our hopes and our dreams. Children of Skyrim, and we fight all our lives. And when Sovngarde beckons, every one of us dies. We drink to our youth, for the days come and gone. For the age of aggression is just about done.
Thank you for listening to Hardly Qualified. Our website can be found at hardlyqualified.ca, and there you can download episodes, leave comments, and check references and links mentioned in the shows. The hosts are on Twitter. Will is at Will Connor, Rob is at TheologyWriter, and Ducky is at AngryDuck_HQ. They can also be reached by email at will, rob, or angryduck@hardlyqualified.ca. All music, unless otherwise specified, is from the game EVE Online and is property of CCP Games. The music can be found at community.eveonline.com/downloads/music. No copyright infringement is intended. The podcast is recorded on Saturday afternoons and scheduled for download the following Friday, which can also be found on iTunes. Thank you, and tune in next week.